Okay, we're going to start out today with talking about this pump setup here. So this pump setup actually has a lot to it. There's going to be a handful of labs that we're going to do. So I just want to give you a quick overview of all of the things that you see here. Hopefully reduce some of the anxiety with this stuff. So I'm going to grab you and I'm going to bring you around to some of these parts, and we're going to talk about them very, very quickly so you can get oriented with them. Okay, first thing that we want to pay attention to is here are our motors. Now, both labs or all the labs aren't going to have all of the motors on there all of the time, but we're going to start out with this one right here. You'll notice that there's a coupling on here, there's a cover. Oh, wait a minute, there's shims. We may or may not have worked on shims yet. So we'll talk a little bit about that and shaft alignment. But we're going to start out with these centrifugal pumps here, and eventually we're going to move on to doing a dual pump system. So we'll talk about that shortly, and that is one of the reasons why we actually have a couple of your frequency drives up here. Frequency drives are very important as far as pump operation because it allows us to change the RPM, therefore changing things like head, pressure, and also the velocity flow and things like that. So a few things to pay attention to. First of all, not in industry you're going to notice this, but all of these here are colored. So we have red, blue, green, black. So that is going to help you be able to plug these in. So the big lesson here isn't on frequency drives, just how they affect pumping systems. The other thing you're going to notice here is this is this is an emergency stop plug over here. We're going to be plugging everything into this. That way, if something happens, we can hit that button there and shut everything down very quickly. So again, these are going to drive the pumps, and the pumps are the motors, and the motors are going to drive the pumps, and then we're going to use the plumbing to set this up. Now, this is an example of a piece of the plumbing. Okay, now this isn't the only piece of plumbing, but this lab is set up to make it very easy to connect. So if you'll go down here and take a look at this connector, okay, notice that it has a flat face here. Notice that this actually has an O-ring that looks just like this right here. So this O-ring is going to go into a groove that is in there. Hopefully it'll stay. Just make sure it has it because it could fall out. And then this is going to go onto this, and you're going to screw this up reasonably tight. Now, a lot of this is plastic, so you want to be careful about over-tightening, but you want to make sure that it's tight enough to where it won't actually come off. Okay, so depending on the circuit that we need to create, you're going to find the appropriate plumbing. Oh, where do I find the plumbing? Glad you asked. We're going to go around here to the side. You're going to notice here that we have all different lengths of plumbing. Also, too, we have some of these small connectors here, and I'm going to see if I can pull these out so we can take a quick peek at these. These are for some of our sensor stuff. What am I talking about sensors? Well, first of all, let's talk about how these things go together. When these things are disconnected here, they're not going to squirt out, okay? But when they are connected here, the other end, okay, is actually open and water can come out of these. But usually they're going to be connected to something like this over here, which is actually going to be your digital pressure gauge, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, of course, this is another very important one over here. Speaking of gauges, as far as your flow meter. Okay, so again, really what we're going to be using this for mostly is actually figuring out the pressure, and notice where the pressure happens. We have a pressure here, that's an inlet, then we have an outlet pressure. Okay, so we'll be able to see what the differences are with those things. Now, a few other things that I want to talk about very quickly in this video is notice the actual tanks. Okay, first of all, we have this large tank up top here. This is going to feed the pumps, okay, and then it's going to recirculate. Then also there is a lower tank down here in case we need to drain it down. Now, if there's no fluid in the upper tank, we're going to need to figure out how to prime the pump. Okay, so a pump can't pump unless there's water present. So we got to figure out how to get water into the pump in order to get it to start drawing the water out from the bottom and then getting it into the top tank. And that is what this little guy right here is for. So we'll be able to fill this up, and then we'll allow that water to flow down the circuit here and then over and into the pump here. And then once that has established a solid basically it's filled with water, then we can start turning some of the other valves in order to change the circuit and where it's pulling water from and where it's going. So down here, you're going to notice a series of valves. And really what you want to do is just get yourself familiar with this so you can kind of see like, oh, well, if I open this, then this one's connected to this, and then it stops here. So in other words, if I turn this valve off right here and I turn this valve on, then the connection is from the lower tank to the plumbing up on top. Okay, so again, not going to show you exactly what everything does, but just point you in the right direction so that you understand what's going on. All right, so I pretty much covered all of this here with the exception of one last little thing. We talked quickly about the centrifugal pumps. There are so many different other pumps that we're going to go through with this particular lab. So down here in the lower section, there's multiple pumps here. There's some piston pumps. There are some vane pumps, there's some gear pumps, and different things like that. So as we move through the labs, we're going to be grabbing these different pumps and we're going to be setting them up. And then we're going to look at the pumps as far as the performance characteristics of pressure and flow.